So in this video, we're going to be reviewing the infamous Mud Skipper Twister. Not quite as short as a surface drive, but works like a surface drive. Not quite as long as a long tail. It's got this funky curved shaft. I heard that your mom likes a curved shaft. Send it. So here what we're going to do. We're going to put this mud motor kit together, and we're going to put it on my Predator 670 22 horsepower Harbor Freight engine. Then we're going to do some real world testing with it in the water, and in the muddy water, and also in the grassy water. And then we're going to try to destroy it, which is also known as durability testing. So buckle up, Buttercup. Let's get after it. This microphone nice and close so we can do a classic YouTube unboxing. Oh my God! Listen to all of this rustling. Everyone hates that. Don't do that on YouTube. Even with all this packing tape and bubble wrap and foam that they put in this thing, they still managed to damage it. Man, that sucks. Thank you, FedEx, for using my box in the Kickball World Championship at your hub. And for whoever did this at FedEx, I hope that your truck flips over while you're trying to avoid a squirrel on the road. So here's what we got in the box. Came with a prop already attached and then a little bit bigger prop. The only problem is they didn't put a number on this thing anywhere at all. I can't tell what size this is. Thank you, Mud Skipper, for not labeling this. Yeah, it looks like it's about 8. And then the other one they sent me looks like it is a 9.5, 8-inch prop, 9.5-inch prop. Actually came with a pretty decent screwdriver. I'm not shocked this was in the kit, but it's got these little nubbies on there, studded for your pleasure. And it came with a full set of wrenches. I know this is only 3 wrenches, but it's a 8, a 10, those two-sided, and this one's a 14 and a 17, and this one's a 17 and a 19. And heck, I can build a Honda Civic with those, so those are cool. I got a bag of hardware, another bag of hardware, but black, and this thing. Really not sure what that is. It's probably in this destruction bag, which we'll have to check that out. You got the motor clamp. This thing's pretty stout. It's just not very deep. I hate it when they do this on mud motors, and they don't make them to where they go down very deep. So it looks like you're at the bottom of the cup, you're at 3 inches. I mean, it's stout, it's all steel, it's powder coated, it's very heavy. But yeah, if you are a mud motor manufacturer of any kind, we want deeper transom clamps. Like, make this 5 or 6 inches deep, yo. Now this is a little something different I've never seen. We got a set of washers with a roller bearing in there of some type. And then of course we got the curved shaft, and for the curious minds who like to measure their shafts, we're about the 51-ish inches. People seem to either love these things or hate them, so we're gonna find out when we get this thing all put together and go test it out. Comes with a handle, grips already installed, throttle controls already installed, cable right here to connect to the motor, and this is the main bracket here. We got the motor sitting here, shaft will go here, and then this piece actually sits on the transom clamp. There's some Zerk fittings right there, so we can put some grease in there. Let's see what's in the destruction bag. Ooh, stickers. Lots of stickers. And it's a kill switch assembly. And of course, we've got our assembly destructions. And it's in color. Very nice. I like this. Good job on this, Mud Skipper. Now I just got to go read it and see if I can actually figure out how to put one of these together. Looks like my receipt. You can see right there, $957.04. This is for the newest version, the version 4 of the Twister Short Longtail 18 to 23 horsepower. For complete transparency, I am not sponsored by Mud Skipper or any other mud motor company for that matter. I purchased this solely with my own money. This is my online receipt right here with my order number, and this Twister cost me a grand total of $957.04. The actual mud motor kit without an engine, just by itself, is $820. Shipping was $74.43, and the wonderful government extortion fee was $62.61. And I paid that with my own hard-earned money because I wanted to try out this new Gen 4 or version 4 of this Twister and see if it's worth the crap or not. What you're fixing to see is my experience with this mud motor, and at the very end of the video, I will give my opinion on this kit and whether it's worth it or not to purchase it. One slight issue with the install. You hook this up to the battery, just got the shaft attached. It is really struggling to get that prop to turn. Way down in there, you can see where it was grinding up against the backside of the flex shaft that goes down to the prop. So I got 2 options. I can either remove this spacer, which I'm really not even sure why that spacer is there in the first place, or I can cut this key down. And I think that's what I'm gonna do. All right, so just use a little cut-off wheel, and I left their little rounded edge on there. I just cut the back side of it. Now, as best I can tell, that looks exactly like it does in the picture. But in this picture, their spacer looks a lot shorter than the one that I have. This one looks a lot longer. Oh, still doing it. Well, back to the drawing board. Most engines will require the spacer, pictured above left. So what's the spacer? So work fine without the spacer. As you see right here, prepare gasoline engine for assembly. Most engines will require the spacer, pictured above left. That's that right there. So most engines apparently does not include the Predator 670. So the installation of the transom clamp and putting the motor onto the transom clamp went smooth-ish. There's a couple of things that I do want to point out about this install that are not really mentioned or not covered well in the user manual. The first is going to be what they call the pivot bearing, and that is this open style roller bearing that is on top of the transom clamp. In the user manual, it says this bearing provides smooth rotation of the kit in a 360-degree circle, and the bearing is exposed, can be greased after assembly is complete. Now, how in the world they expect you to get grease on this afterwards is beyond me, but I went ahead and greased it before I put it together. And I don't see how it can be greased from the outside once it's installed. And I don't know if I would even trust that. I would more than likely pull the motor off once or twice a season and put grease on the roller bearings themselves. I could be totally wrong because I've never seen a bearing exposed like this before, but I'm just going based off of what I see here. The second thing I noticed that I could not find in the user manual, it may be in there and I just didn't see it, on the side of the coupler that slides down onto the pin that's on the transom clamp, there's a Phillips head screw and there's also a 10mm bolt. Doesn't say inside the user manual exactly what those are for, or at least not that I could find. There is a recessed cutout all the way around the pin on this transom clamp, and once installed, it is in line with this lower bolt hole. I'm making an assumption based on what I'm seeing that you're supposed to put that bolt back into that hole so that it can ride in that recess area and help keep the motor from popping up or coming off the transom clamp when you're out running around. The other hole I am assuming is for a grease fitting, because I put a grease fitting on there and it seemed to fit. Now, how much grease it is actually going to push into this area where this pin is and down into the bearings, I don't know. But because I couldn't find it in the user manual, Jesus take the wheel, that's what I'm doing. My only other complaint is they put this bolt in while it was being powder coated. So this bolt and the little lock nut that goes on it were powder coated together, and they were really difficult to get out. Because once you powder coat over the head of this bolt, it doesn't fit the 10mm wrench anymore until you chip some of that powder coating away or you just wear it off. Really annoying. I can't stand that. Aside from that, everything else seemed to go pretty smooth. My only concern is all the weight is on the motor side. Typically with standard longtails, you have an adjustment to where you can move the motor bracket further back or further forward, however you want this thing to balance. I'm not going to complain about it too much just yet because I haven't had it in the water yet and I don't know how it's going to run. But that was one thing that just kind of popped out to me. I have this stopper bolt as far in as I can go, and I can only push this thing down to about a foot underneath the boat. So if you're actually going to use this for running in mud or anywhere with a really soft bottom and you plan on doing some getting stuck, you have to remember that this thing is going to limit you on how far down you can get it into the mud or soft bottom to get you moving forward. If you were to take this bolt completely out, holy crap, that's a long bolt, but with it out, I can get this thing to almost touch the ground, which would be about 2.5 to 3 foot below the boat. So there's an option if you absolutely need it, but you're gonna have to carry a wrench in your boat with you in order to take this thing out. If you get to a really bad situation, you get super stuck in something super soft and you need that extra distance to get down there, you might have to take this bolt out. Now at normal ride height, which is probably going to be about right here, with pods on my boat, I am going to be limited to turning distance. I'm not going to be able to turn this thing all the way off to the side of the boat like I'm used to with a longtail. Longtails with pods usually clear the top of the pods and I don't have to worry about anything, but that's going to be my maximum turning distance this way. And then over here on this side, that's going to be about my maximum turning distance this way. And same thing when it's down low. That's as far low as I can go. And I'm going to hit the inside of the pod there and hit the inside of the pod there. Which brings me to my next conundrum that I have to figure out a solution for, is I cannot swing this thing inside of my boat. Typically with a longtail, I just, kind of walk it around over here to this side, and I would swing it all the way around and get it into the boat. We are actually hitting on the pod and the transom clamp over there, and if I try it over here on this side, I can't get it up high enough to go up and over my transducer mount before I hit the pod, so that's not going to work. So now I need to come up with a solution of how to strap this thing down so that I can transport it with the tail all flopping out here in traffic. And I've also got to put some kind of flag on here when I'm transporting it, because you know some idiot is going to be posting feet pictures on the old book face while they're driving down the road and take one of these to the front grille of their Subaru. So let's see what I can figure out. So here is attempt number 1 at towing. I got this old cut off a 6x6. And then I've got a ratchet strap running from my grab handle on the back up and around the handle, and then from this side of the handle running over to this grab rail back here. And I'm hoping that it'll have enough pressure to push down to where it won't move around. And I did pull on the ratchet strap and say that's not going anywhere, so we should be good. So my 6x6 board did survive the trip down to the lake. Rode for about 45 minutes, and as you can see, it did kind of go off to the side just a little bit. It's still secure. I didn't feel like it's really going anywhere, and it didn't flop around at all, but I need to find a better solution than this. Now, my first test run with the Mud Skipper Twister was definitely a learning experience. Now, for reference, my boat is a 1970 1648 low Jon boat, so 16 foot long, 48 inches wide at the bottom. It is very heavy. I've got a steel front bumper on this boat. I know steel sounds absolutely stupid, but I do hit a lot of crap with the front of my boat. 2 trolling motor batteries, rod holders, all my gear, plus the 670 Predator motor on the back. It adds up to quite a bit of weight when you put my 250-pound butt in the boat as well. Now, the very first thing that I learned is that you have to set that trim bolt. It is not like a longtail where you can just leave it floating out there behind the boat and adjust it by pushing down or holding up on the handle. That trim bolt is the magic recipe with the Twister. When I first started out, I had it way too low, so I had to prop way down in the water, which is what I'm used to. What's like when I run a surface drive like a gator tail or even the Featherlight. What I would do with the surface drive is put the prop way down in the water, you know, a foot or two below the surface, and as the boat starts to pick up speed, I'll raise the prop up towards the surface. What I first experienced with the Twister is when you give it gas, whether it's on the surface or below the surface, if you don't have that trim bolt set right, the motor wants to dive down underneath the water. And then while you're running it, it's really hard to keep it up at the surface if you don't have that trim bolt set. For me, I had to push down on the handle once I got up to speed just to keep it up near the surface where it needs to run, where you got half the prop out of the water and half the prop below the surface of the water, because that's where I got the most speed at. But trying to do it without that trim bolt set was a nightmare. So I had to stop several times, adjust the trim bolt until I got it riding up near the surface where I needed it to be, and I just kept tinkering around with it until I got my maximum speed of around 17 miles an hour, high 16s, low 17s for a typical cruising speed. And if I held my mouth just right and faced the wind in just the perfect direction and stood right in the center of the boat, I could pop out an 18. About 16, 17 was what I averaged with the small prop that came on the Twister shaft. Once I got it set up, it was great. It was super easy to drive. I didn't have to push down or pull up on the handle at all. It just kind of drove itself. And I was even more shocked that I had more turning distance than I thought. I was really concerned that the shaft was going to hit the pods when I needed to make a really tight turn, but it actually turned very well. I was super surprised. And just in one use, we are already rusting. We had a lot of rust on that shaft right there. That is not something that I like to see. Also, in the spots that were scratched by FedEx, thank you FedEx, they are already starting to rust just after one use. So I'm gonna have to come in here and paint that to stop that rust. All the hardware on this looks fine. Hardware up here looks fine. This looks okay. Bearing looks okay because it's nice and greased. But one thing I did notice is all the hardware that bolts the bell housing onto the motor is already starting to rust. This is after one trip, just one single trip to the river just to go test this thing out for a couple of hours, and we're already seeing rust on this hardware. If I decide to keep this thing long term, I'm gonna be changing out some of this hardware, something better. Wanted to start out with a small prop because my boat is kind of heavy, and generally when I run a longtail, I'm usually running a smaller prop than most people do. And it didn't sound like the motor was really struggling to get that 16 miles an hour. So what I want to do is try out the bigger prop and see if my RPMs come down. Now on this motor, I do not have a governor, and it has been modified a little bit. Polished head, Mikuni carburetor, stiffer valve springs. So I'm gonna go out today and try it again with the bigger prop and see what kind of results we get. But before I put that new prop on, I gotta address some of this rust because this is bad. Golly, one trip already rusting that much. That does not make me a happy panda. I'm gonna start by brushing as much of this rust off as I can, and we'll lube it up with some grease. Now, this is one thing that you're gonna need to keep in mind if you decide to get this kit, is it's gonna take some maintenance on these steel parts. Once or twice a season, you're gonna need to pull your prop off and give it a good cleaning and a greasing to make sure that you don't wind up with a seized prop because of all the rust that's on this thing. And the hardware too. Look at the rust that's developing on the hardware. I thought this stuff was going to be stainless, or you would at least think it's stainless. Now, this end bolt may be stainless. It looks like that's just rust from the actual shaft that's on the surface of that. And it seems like it's coming off pretty easy, so this actually may be stainless. That's a good shot of grease on there. We'll smear that all around. Hopefully this will help. One other thing I noticed when I was driving this the other day, and this is not a twister issue. This is on any long tail twister and sometimes even surface drives. When I'm running it, I can feel that the prop wants to pull this way, which is going to be to the port side of the boat. Now, it wasn't doing it a lot. It wasn't so much that like on a long tail where it wants to ride up the side of the wake and pop out of the water. On this, it was just a constant pull. Like I could just feel a constant tension on the tiller handle wanting to pull back this way. The way you fix that is just take an adjustable wrench, put it here on the end of the skeg, and you just bend it just a little bit. Doesn't take a whole lot. So as you can see here, straight coming off, I only bent it over about 1/4 of an inch or so. I've had some long tails where I've had to pull this out like a full inch away just to keep it riding straight. You always want to bend the skeg in the direction that it's trying to pull. What that's going to do is as water is coming towards this skeg, the water's going to shoot off to this side. It's going to push the entire tail back in the direction that you want it to go. When you first get out and start testing this, or if you're testing a long tail, you need to keep an adjustable wrench in the boat with you, because this is one of the main things that I always have to adjust on almost every single mud motor that I mess with. It's worked out pretty good for transporting. I didn't really need all 3 feet of it, so I cut it down into a small piece. But one thing I did notice when I was out on the water fishing the other day, anytime I wanted to use my trolling motor, I really needed to get this prop down in the water to kind of act as a rudder to allow me to steer the trolling motor in the back end of the boat, not wander all over the place. And the natural resting position of this twister is with the prop up and out of the water. And with just a single 2x6, it wasn't really enough to even get the skeg down into the water shoved up underneath the motor. So I just put in another 2x4 with a couple of screws on top of this. Now I can slide this underneath and push it all the way to the back, and that gets most of the skeg down into the water so that I'll be able to steer with the trolling motor just a little bit better when I'm not using the twister.
For the second test run, I ended up going down to Pensacola, Florida, so I could run around in the marsh a little bit and see how it handles some really shallow water and a lot of grass. The adjustment I made by bending the skeg was absolutely perfect. It only needed about 1/4 of an inch on my particular boat setup to make it run straight. I had no problems with steering after that skeg adjustment. Now, changing up to the 9.5 inch prop, the bigger of the two that comes with the kit, brought my total RPMs down to about 4,800. I was running 5,000 RPMs or more with the 8-inch prop, and I also picked up a little bit of speed. I was able to run a consistent 19 miles an hour just about everywhere I went with that 9.5 inch prop. Now, if I got some really skinny water, I'm talking like a couple of inches, it actually picked up a little bit of speed. I didn't get it on camera, but I did hit 20.7 miles per hour at one point, and that's pretty typical with my boat. I usually pick up at least a 1/2 mile an hour, sometimes a full mile an hour when I'm running in really skinny water. Now, what I noticed with the twister is it didn't matter if I was in 60 foot of water, 10 foot of water, or 10 inches of water. I got 19 miles an hour pretty consistent no matter what. Moving up to the 9.5 inch prop, I did have to play around with the trim bolt some more and pick up the prop on the surface of the water about another inch or so. So when I first put the boat in the water, I turned on my GPS speedometer, just tried to see what I was running. It felt like it wasn't getting as fast as it should. I was still running that 17, 18 mile an hour range. So little by little, I just adjusted that trim bolt, like a 1/2 turn at a time until it just felt right. I wish there was a real technical way for me to tell you like, hey, this is when it's set right, but it just felt good. It was real easy to steer. There wasn't a gigantic rooster tail coming off the back of the boat. It was maybe about 3 or 4 foot of rooster tail, but the mud motor just ran really well. So if you do decide to get this kit, just plan on spending some time messing around with that trim bolt and getting it to ride just right.
All right, so I just got back from a weekend at the coast playing with this thing in the salt water, and I did rinse this thing off as soon as I got back. We got some rust, like a lot of rust. I'm going to pull this thing off because I do want to try the prop adapter, and we'll see what we're looking like, because I did grease this before I left. There's a lot of rust transferred on there. So you can see here on the back side of the prop, I have a lot of rust that's coming out of the end of the shaft here, and a lot of rust over here, but the shaft itself actually looks okay. And I'm gonna spray it with some PB Blaster and see if we can prevent more rust from happening. Here's the prop adapter that comes with the kit. And it's got little splines in there, and then it's got a little notch on here so that you can slide this just like that, and it works with a regular aluminum longtail prop. My only concern with this prop adapter is it's been sitting in my shop and it's already starting to show some signs of rust as well. You just line the splines up, slide it on, soak this thing down, just line up our prop, slide it on. A slight problem here, when I go to slide this prop on, it does not leave enough room on the shaft to be able to put the washer on. I put it on like this, there's not enough threads to actually engage. Even if I can get this on here without the washer, there is a lot of play in that prop because the shaft adapter is not the same size as the inside of this beaver dam prop. Now I'm just curious about what's actually going to fit this. I got quite a few props, so let's give some a try. This is a 9.5-inch beaver dam prop. That's not going to work. Here's a 9-inch beaver dam prop. That might work, but it looks like the key way is too small for this little key that they have, and I'd have to open up that key to make that work. Here's an 8.5-inch prop. This is SPS, so this is Swamp Runner, and same thing, the key way is too small for this key on this adapter, but it looks like we have enough threads to where we could get this to work if we needed to. And here's an 8-inch CLP, so that's a beaver dam prop, and that one actually fits. Wondering if I could just grind that shoulder down a little bit and get it to fit a little bit further. I can't say for certain that my aggressive grinding tactics were the appropriate choice for this, but it did work. Give me just enough clearance to get that lock washer and this nut back on. It is not enough clearance, I don't think, to get the cotter pin back in. That is definitely on there more secure, and there's no prop wobble. So the only thing to do is full send on a 10-inch prop.
Now, testing out the 10-inch aluminum prop wasn't as impressive as I had hoped. My speed actually dropped down into the 17, 18 mile an hour range for pretty consistent cruising. And even with playing with the trim bolt, I felt like it was a lot more picky about where I stood in the boat to get me past that 17 mile an hour range into the 18s. So for instance, if I was standing at the very back of the boat close to the tiller handle and I was only running like 17 and a half miles an hour, if I took a step forward, I could instantly see it start to pick up some speed, get closer to that 18 mile an hour range. And then if I leaned forward just a little bit more, sometimes I could get like 18.2, 18.3. Also, during my test with the 10-inch aluminum prop was my first time that I really got to get into some really shallow water that had mud. Now, this clip that you're seeing right now, I was only in about 3, maybe 4 inches of water. And I really needed to push the prop down into the mud to get the bottom of the boat to skip across the top of the mud. What was happening is I was going through this really shallow section, and I wanted to get the boat up on plane so I could skate across the top of the mud instead of pushing through it. And that's exactly what was happening. I could not get the prop low enough to really get me up and onto plane until I got into some deeper water. And that's one of the things that you're going to have to be aware of with this kit. Unless you're willing to stop what you're doing, screw that trim bolt in so that you can get that prop down into the mud. It's going to be a little bit harder for you to get up and moving in super skinny water that has a mud or really soft bottom. But I'm glad I did the test with the 10-inch aluminum prop because it taught me something. The 9.5-inch stainless prop that the kit came with was the perfect one for my boat. Now, I will still keep the 8-inch prop inside the boat with me just in case I get into a situation where I've got 2 or maybe even a third person on the boat, or a bunch of weight, a bunch of decoys, something like that. Generally, when you go up in weight, you need to go down in prop size to maintain it somewhat closer to the same speed that you had. Regardless, I would still test out an aluminum prop in different sizes on your boat if you decide to get this kit. It's at least worth giving it a shot, especially if you already have longtail props laying around like I do. Test out all the different prop sizes, those 1/2-inch sizes that are in between the 9 and the 8, maybe even a 10 if you're on a smaller, lighter weight boat, might work great for you. So last test I want to do with the Mud Skipper Twister is I want to test out this flex shaft. The flex shaft is inside this main shaft here, is a lot like what you would see on a weed eater. It is probably one of the most debated topics that I have seen on the internet, is whether or not this flex shaft can actually hold up to some abuse. So I want to do my own little version of an abuse test. And I've done this test before on longtails. I've got a video, I'll link it up here so you guys can check it out if you want to. I tested out some stainless steel props on longtails just to see how it would hold up. And I also wanted to see how the shaft that's inside of a longtail would hold up to this kind of abuse. Cut a cooler in half, I bashed it against rocks, buried it in the ground, and hit gravel with it, and the longtail held up just fine. So I want to do a similar test. The first one we're going to try is this pallet. What I want to try to replicate is what would happen if you hit, like, a little
dock piling or side of a dock or a big stump or something. I want to see what exactly will happen. If nothing happens, then we'll try out some cinder block. All right, let's try it first at idle. Nothing really at idle, let's do it at speed. It did a pretty good number on that wood. No breakage yet. It's like we even chewed through a couple nails right there. And only one problem, we've done lost a prop nut. I saw this thing rattling when it was idling, and yeah, prop nut came off. And the lock washer. So now I gotta look around on gravel and try to find it. Yay. Well, it only took me about 45 minutes, but I found the nut and I found the lock washer. I forgot to put the cotter pin back in when I switched over to the stainless prop. By the way, just looking at the stainless prop, it's not that bad. It did fairly well. It's holding up better than I thought it would. I am kind of glad that I lost this because it gave me time to let this cool down. This shaft gets pretty hot when it's not in the water, but now it's cool to the touch. It's time for us to try out the cinder block. All right, cinder block at idle. Let's see. Cutting a hole in the cinder block. All right, let's do it at speed. Try this again. This thing's actually held up surprisingly well. I mean, it did cut the cinder block in half multiple times. And we got some pretty chewed up edges on it, and looks like I did some self-cupping. But overall, the prop is alive. The shaft, surprisingly, did not break. The skeg needs a new paint job. And yeah, it broke a cinder block in half, so a little better than I thought it was. So now that I've had some time to thoroughly use and abuse the old mud skipper twister, what do I think about it? I am super shocked at how well this thing held up. It held up to my torture test with no issues. I did destroy the prop, but it's still on there. Like, I could still get back home with this prop if I needed to. And everything else in the kit held up well, except for the hardware. Performance-wise, it actually performs really well as a air-cooled shallow water outboard. As a mud motor, not so great. What makes it a poor choice for a true mud motor and getting you out of places that you might get stuck is this trim bolt that it's got right here. But to get that prop up on the surface of the water and make the tiller handle easy to steer, have to set that trim bolt. Like, there is no option. But where it runs good in the water is a lot higher up in the water column, like almost up on the surface, versus where I need to be if I get stuck down in the mud. But if you are just looking to go into shallow water where you're not planning on getting stuck, you're not going to be running through mud, you're not going to be running in places where you might get stuck. You're just going to run through some really shallow stuff, some shallow weeds, those shallow sandbars and stuff like that, where there's still visible water, this thing will probably work great because it runs so well in deep open water. Like I ran across a bunch of lakes, I ran across the bay in Pensacola, and the open water performance is just flawless. Like it works, and it works well. And it works well in shallow water, but there has to be water. And if you're planning on going out in the mud flats and running with gator tails and the pro drives and all that other stuff, you need to buy something else. This is not what you need. I am also in the middle of filming the review video for the Mud Skipper Featherlight Surface Drive. I've already tested it on this boat. I'm about to go test it on a 1436 in the next week or two. So that video will be coming up soon. But what's coming up right now, we got to go see what Scooter's been up to. Well, Send It video would not be complete without some time in the haters corner. I've got some haterade in my cup, so here we go. If you're not familiar with the haters corner, what we like to do at the end of every video is stand in a corner and see who was the most butthurt in the comments over the last few videos. Now we know that people on the interwebs are extremely sensitive, so we don't use their real names. We just call them Scooter. And boy, have I got a Scooter for this video. Now before I get into Scooter's comment, let me give you just a little bit of a backstory so you got some context to this comment. Many moons ago, I did a video on the Mud Skipper clutch. I think it's called the Retriever clutch. So for this video, Mud Skipper actually reached out to me. They said, hey, we've got a clutch. Would you like to do a review video on it? I said, yeah, sure. If you want to send me one, I'll put it on one of my mud motors and I'll go do a video review on it. No guarantee that I'm going to like it, but I will review it and I'll give an honest opinion here on YouTube. They did not pay me for the review. They didn't give me like a coupon code to give the subscribers of the channel a discount on buying Mud Skipper products. They just gave me the product and said, here, go review it. Now, let me also remind you that I am a previous Mud Skipper customer. I bought one of their longtail kits for my longtail review video many years before that. Spent my own hard-earned money on their kit. And I had some good things to say about it, and I gave an honest review of their product in that video. It wasn't bad. So there's the backstory. I have no official affiliation with Mud Skipper. Actually, I don't have any official affiliation with any mud motor company. If they want to send me stuff for review, I will gladly do it. But I will not accept money from any company to give them a good review. And if they give me something for free, it has zero value to me, so I am going to try to destroy it. And that is exactly what I did to the Retriever clutch from Mud Skipper. I abused the hell out of it to see if it would fail. And it didn't. It did well. I actually really like it. Now, do I personally need one? I talked about this in that video. I don't personally need one. It's a great product, but I don't need it. Now, the only issue that I had with that Retriever clutch in that video was that I couldn't always get it to stop at low speed. Like I couldn't idle my motor like really low enough to get it to stop spinning all the time. Sometimes it would stop and sometimes it wouldn't, which brings me to the comment section of this video. We had a comment, not from a Scooter, just from a regular viewer, and they said, great video. I'm a dealer for Mud Skipper in Canada. I ordered a couple of the clutches for 7 horsepower and 15 horsepower this week. Glad to see they fit other kits, and I'm pretty sure they're supposed to stop 100%. AZ Longtails did a video of the clutch, and it stops fully. I wonder why yours doesn't fully stop. Keep up the good work, bud. Thank you, Mr. Mud Skipper dealer in Canada. I don't know much about Canada, except for you people say A lot, and y'all have maple syrup and Alanis Morissette's from there. Scooter responded to the Canuckians comment and said, you wonder why it doesn't stop. Operator error, perhaps. Over 1,000 sold and no one else has the problem. Again, I know people on the internet are super sensitive, so I am not going to name this Scooter, but I know who this Scooter is. There is a 104% chance that this Scooter that left this comment has some type of an affiliation with the company Mud Skipper. So I would like to give an important message to the employees, the people that actually work at Mud Skipper. Y'all need to get Pawpaw Scooter off of the internet. Take his internet away from him for a while, because not only have I seen Pawpaw Scooter responding to people's YouTube comments, but I also see him on Facebook and Instagram quite a bit, and it does not look good. What you need to do is you need to tell Pawpaw Scooter to focus. Now, focus is an acronym, and focus stands for fuck off because you're stupid. What operator error is there in a centrifugal clutch? There is literally zero input from the operator to the clutch. It's just attached. And it didn't even say that anything was wrong with it. I just letting people know, hey, you might have one like mine and it just doesn't stop fully all the time. Not a big deal, and not really worth putting your name out there on the internet when people can find out that you're associated with said business. Especially when I was doing y'all a favor and reviewing your product and actually saying decent things about it, because it is a decent product. It's a cool little clutch. Me personally, I don't really need it, but I also don't need Pawpaw Scooter jumping in my comment section and talking crap about me, because I have no problem telling Pawpaw Scooter to take his little comments, dip them in dog shit, wrap them in barbed wire, and shove them up his pee-pee hole sideways. And that's not just for Pawpaw Scooter. I will be an asshole to anyone that's an asshole in my comments section. Speaking of assholes, do you know why the crack of your butt goes up and down and not side to side? If it went side to side every time you went down a slide, it would sound like now you know.